Allison McKee. I'm a volunteer chairperson with the Kansas City Cherokee community. We're going to have Bobby start off in prayer before the chief begins. Bobby, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. OCO, everyone, if you would bow your head in prayer. Father, our Creator, we thank you for this time of fellowship together. We lift up all those who are ill, who are hurting or in need, and we pray for all of our people. God, when we are challenged, guide us, and when we are weary, energize us. Be with our speaker, David, today as he shares his wisdom and knowledge. Bless Chief Hoskins with wisdom and discernment as he leads our people and our tribe. We thank you for the many blessings you have given us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Yeah. Wado, Bobby. Chief, whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you very much, Melissa, and thanks to everyone with the Kansas City Cherokee organization. I appreciate that you all have found a way to stay engaged during these difficult times when we can't gather in person so much. Hopefully that is slowly and safely changing. I don't know how the conditions are in the Kansas City area. In Oklahoma, we like the COVID numbers that we're seeing, except for one, and that is the vaccination rate. The vaccination rate is far too low. We need to get that up. We're working every day with some talented men and women in our health staff and our communications department to do more outreach for our citizens to take the vaccine. So the point is that, we've got a long ways to go, I think, but we can safely start opening things a bit back up, and we're doing that in the Cherokee Nation. So let me update you all on a few of the things that we're working on. One of the things I'll mention at the top is the Cherokee National Holiday is something that we all enjoy, and hopefully you've all had an opportunity to attend. This year will be a hybrid event, and we did a press release on that a couple weeks ago, I think, so you can look at our press website, anadisco.com, to get some details on that. But some of the events will be in person. Some of the events that typically draw larger crowds, so the parade, for example, we won't be doing the parade. The powwow, we will do it with a very limited in-person audience with the participants and their immediate I think of their immediate family and then the staff necessary to keep the event going. But for the most part, it will be virtual. There'll be some in-person opportunities with some traditional games and some other cultural activities. So we are taking a very slow approach and a conservative approach to the Cherokee Nation concerning COVID safety. I wish I could look ahead and tell you exactly how conditions will be in September. I could tell you that Wish I could tell you that we've reached herd immunity on vaccination by Labor Day weekend, Cherokee holiday weekend, but we can't say that with any degree of certainty. So we have to play it safe for the sake of everyone. But things are opening back up a bit more. That makes, I think, all of us feel better about our outlook and our future. We've come through all of this difficulty so far together. We've lost people along the way, and that's a very difficult thing. And I think we've all, suffered in some way because of COVID, whether it's health directly or the health of loved ones, loss of loved ones and friends, or even the economic toll that COVID has taken on all of us as prices for staples increase, and in some cases people are displaced in the economy because of the impact of COVID. We, I think, have led the nation in many ways on COVID response, in large part because I put my trust in some people who are far more intelligent, far sharper than I am on some really important things, and that is public health and how to keep safe during COVID. We have been driven by facts and science and compassion for our fellow Cherokees and our friends and neighbors, and I think that's led us to make some good decisions on safety. And I hope that it's made an impact in terms of keeping people healthier than they otherwise would be. And I think that the efforts of our health department, some of our safety protocols have surely saved some lives and stemmed some misery. But we're proud of the effort. Our main focus now in terms of COVID is the vaccination effort. I'll tell you right now, across the reservation, our vaccination percentage is in the low 30% range, which is far too low. Our workforce is in the around the 40% range, low 40% range. So we're leading. The workforce is leading the rest of the reservation, but that number is also too low. So we continue to make efforts to encourage and even with our workforce incentivize the vaccine, taking the vaccine. So I want to touch on one other thing before I introduce our delegate to the House of Representatives and our Executive Director of Government Relations, Kim Teehee. And it's something that involves her department and really helps, I think, us all understand how important government relations are to the Cherokee Nation. They've always been important. I think in the present environment where we have a great deal at stake, whether it's navigating the challenges and seizing opportunities presented by the McGirt case, or whether it is making sure that Indian country in general and Cherokee Nation in particular gets its fair share of resources from the government of the United States as the Congress enacts legislation to help the country respond to COVID and recover from COVID. Hopefully we're more in a recovery mode now. It's always a balance, of course. And all of that takes, I think, sharp focus on engaging with the Congress, building relationships with federal agencies and advocating for our interest in Washington, D.C. Also takes that same form in Oklahoma City on a variety of issues in the state capitol. We just came to the conclusion of the legislative session in which we're happy with some results that we've achieved. But the main focus lately of government relations has been the American Recovery Plan Act. And you may have heard something about this in the news and on social media, but we are receiving $1.8 billion, that's billion with a B, in ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funds to the Cherokee Nation. We have those funds in place. Those funds are designed to continue to, again, respond to COVID, which is, the worst public health emergency in living memory, and to also make sure we can recover economically and to make sure we have resources in place to take care of what I think, and people more expert than me think, are going to be some long-term difficulties, not just in our physical health, but also our mental well-being as we come out of a year in which there's a great deal of isolation and the pressures that go along with that and the difficulties that go along with that. And you think a lot about elders who already sometimes struggle in isolation, and then you layer the uncertainty and anxiety and additional isolation from COVID over that vulnerable population. And you really start to worry about what kind of impact it is having. So responding to that is a main focus of the Cherokee Nation. So I have sent a proposal to the council of the Cherokee Nation. Deputy Chief Warner and I worked on this. Members of our cabinet worked on this. Staff worked on this. And what it is it's a place to begin. It's certainly not a place to end in terms of the discussion about how we use what is, I think, plainly the largest single outlay of funds from the Congress to the Cherokee Nation in the history of the country. What we're proposing, if you look at the priorities, and you can check it out on our website, we did a press release on this yesterday. I also have a video up on our Facebook page in which I delve in a bit into the details and kind of talk about why we're doing what we're doing in terms of the proposal. If you look at the proposal, it will look a lot like what I think most Cherokees over the years have told me ought to be our priorities. So education, job training, economic impact in terms of like economic development, housing is a big part of this plan. Infrastructure, which again helps with the economy and helps bring things like clean water and safe roads to communities that need them. Also, healthcare, and I think healthcare is always important to the Cherokee people. But I think now, for the reasons I mentioned about sort of the long-term things we're all going to have to together sort of wrestle with coming out of COVID, whether it's for our physical health or our mental well-being as a tribe, as a collection of people who care about each other, I think we're going to have to do more. And, you know, in healthcare, we've done a great deal in the past decade. We've injected $300 million into our health system with new state-of-the-art health facilities, but there are still gaps, and those gaps are particularly apparent when it comes to what we can do for drug treatment, what we can do for mental health services for our people. We have wonderful men and women working in our behavioral health facility. We need more of them, and we need more services, and we need more facilities. I mean, we need a drug treatment center in the Cherokee Nation. We also need a new hospital in the Cherokee Nation. We're growing, and we can't stop and rest on our laurels just because we've done something pretty monumental, which is to create the largest health system in all of Indian country, and I think the best health system in Indian country. We can't stop. We have to continually look at how we can build it better. And I think if we do that, we will be serving the Cherokee people the way they deserve. I'm mindful that living at large, access to our health services is something that is not a reality for many of you. But I do think that every Cherokee takes some pride in knowing that the tribe puts healthcare as a priority and that we are in fact leading Indian country on healthcare. These federal dollars will allow us to accelerate a lot of the plans that Deputy Chief Warner and I, members of the council, leaders from previous administrations have thought about on a longer time horizon, perhaps a decade or 2 decades. We can now make those a reality. If we think and act strategically, we can make them a reality in a matter of years, not decades. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, my goodness, we've all endured a great deal of hardship in the last year. It's good to be able to see some opportunities that are really stemming from the country's response to COVID. What I haven't mentioned is surely of interest to everyone, and that is the direct cash assistance to Cherokee citizens. Of the funds, of the $1.8 billion, 43%, more than 43%, are being committed to direct cash assistance to Cherokee citizens. And our view is that every Cherokee, no matter where you live, whether you live at large, whether you live here, no matter where you live, you are affected in some way by COVID economically. And it may be because your health was affected. It may be because a loved one's health was affected. It might be because, again, you were one of those who were displaced in the economy because of the economic impact of COVID. And the other impacts include just prices that are going up faster than they normally would, as economists would estimate. And that includes staples like groceries. Those are going up. Energy costs are going up for us in many parts of the country. So if you've heard about this on Facebook or elsewhere, we are proposing that this year, 2021, Cherokee citizens, irrespective of age, income, or residency, receive $1,000. And the second year, that a second payment would be issued for $1,000. The great challenge in administering that is just that. It's administering the funds. It's how do we, in an effective, efficient way, serve over 392,000 people, many of whom live across the country. Most of whom, of course, live on the reservation or within the state of Oklahoma. Still a challenge. And so what we are encouraging people to do is to go to the Cherokee Nation website. We have something on there called the Gadoogie portal, which we launched, I think, late last fall, about November. That is bringing the Cherokee Nation into the modern era in a particular respect, and that is how we interact with our citizens and how they interact with us on some very basic things like keeping your address current in registration. If you get married, changing your name, or if you have some other life event that results in a name change. That used to take a great deal of effort through the mail, through traveling to Tahlequah. That's not the world that we need to continue to live in if people have access to the internet. Not everyone does. We're working on that too, by the way. And by the way, our 1.8 billion commits a significant amount to addressing broadband issues across the reservation. But in any case, not everyone can access the internet, but we want to leverage the technology we have and leverage the fact that a huge percentage of Cherokees do have access to the internet. So you can go to that Gadugi portal. I would encourage you all to do that maybe this evening after the call, and you can set up your citizen profile. You do need an email address to do that. You can set one up for your kids if you have kids, an individual account. If they have an email or you want to create an email for them, you can do that. That unique email serves as a username, and so it's important that people use a unique email address. And again, I can't stress and underline enough that we absolutely know that not everyone can do this. And there's some elders that technology is beyond their grasp, even if they are living in an area with connectivity. Of course, we all want to help our grandparents. I helped my great aunt, 82-year-old Jenny Mae Smith of Stillwell yesterday, sign up. But not every elder has that support. We know that. But if you do have that ability, I'd encourage you to sign up. Now, what does that have to do with the payments? What it has to do with the payments is the most efficient way for us to serve the Cherokee people with what will be the largest cash outlay to Cherokee citizens in the history of the Cherokee Nation by sheer number of people and total dollar amount. The most efficient way to do that is to do an electronic application. That application will be in the Gadugi portal. So June 1st, if all goes well, Thursday with the council, June 1st, we will make the application available, but you have to go register on the Gadugi portal, and you have to then go and click a few places on the application to apply. We prefer you get an electronic payment, direct deposit, but you can get a paper check if you would like that as well. This begs the question, what about those who can't access the internet? We will do everything possible to help those citizens. It's obviously easier for us to help people one-on-one close to Tahlequah or close to one of our offices. We have 150 work sites across the reservation. Many of those are set up to help citizens. And so we'll be able to commit some staff to help elders. We did some drive-through events last year when we had an elder payment sign-up, and that went well. And so we had elders drive through. We had staff and volunteers with iPads, and we were able to set up applications. We can do this. It's just going to take some work and some focus. I am particularly concerned about how we accomplish that in the at-large areas. Obviously, there's the barriers, the geographic barriers become more important when we're talking about pieces of paper and we're talking about human interaction. How do we do that? I think the at-large organizations can be of help once leadership of the at-large organization gets acclimated with this process. It could be that you could be a great deal of help to your members of your organizations in navigating the Gadugi portal and the application. I want every single Cherokee to benefit from this program because, like I say, every single Cherokee was affected in some way by COVID. It's just the truth. And we ought to share these resources when we can with the people. So that's, we have a work cut out for us. And I can tell you right now, the one thing I am certain of is that things will not go smoothly. I've learned that if you involve technology and you involve people and you multiply that by enough people and enough technology and computers, things are going to go wrong occasionally. We are a Indian nation that does a great deal and serves a lot of people. We've never had this opportunity, and by extension, we've never borne the burden of administering a program of this size. So just because we haven't done it doesn't mean we can't, but it does mean we can expect some hiccups. So I'd ask everyone to bear with our staff as they do their very best. They're great public servants to try to serve the people. One other thing I'll mention about eligibility. Many people have kids who are not Cherokee citizens, but they're eligible. We are going to staff up our citizenship registration department so that if you apply for your child to be a citizen, that we'll do everything we can to get that application processed, because unlike some programs we ran last year, you have to be a card-carrying Cherokee citizen to qualify for these funds. That's how we've budgeted them. That's how we receive. Frankly, the large amount of money that we received is based on a citizen count, in part on a citizen count. And so we need to adhere to that guideline. Now, this brings us, that's really getting into some very fine details of one particular program, as big as it is. The bigger picture here, though, ladies and gentlemen, is that had COVID hit a generation ago, Cherokee Nation would have been in a much different position, not because we didn't have talented workforce and leaders and people that had were just made of grit and determination, had that in them. We weren't a tribe, though, because of the policies of the United States for so long. We weren't a tribe that had the capacity that we have today. We built that capacity up over time. One of the key areas that we have built up over time, and I'm not just talking about my administration, I mean successive administrations, is government relations. We live in a day and age in which the Congress set aside a special, special amount of money, particular amount of money for Indian country. That doesn't happen a generation ago. It's not just Cherokee Nation's leadership, but I can tell you, having been in this business a while, our leadership has been indispensable to those sorts of efforts and those sorts of accomplishments. So I wish COVID had never hit. If it had to hit, it hit at a time in which the Cherokee Nation has so much more capacity than we had a generation ago, in which we have so much more influence in the Congress of the United States in terms of making sure Indian country gets its fair share. That translates into a $1.8 billion stream of funds that will allow us to stabilize our government, which I think is the most effective government in the country. And it will allow us to stabilize our businesses, which have been a model in the corporate community because we shut down to protect people's lives during COVID. We kept every single person in a paycheck for the months that our casinos in particular were shut down. We are still in a position of strength as a nation, but we would be we would be in a very difficult situation if we did not have the capacity that we have across our nation and our businesses, but particularly in government relations. I can tell you that I have supreme confidence anytime we are sort of going to bat for a legislative initiative, anytime we are trying to explain to a federal agency what our needs are, what our objectives are. I have so much confidence in our government relations team because, number one, it's a talented team, and I hope that you get to meet some of them. But the leader of that team is who you really need to hear from, and that is our delegate to the United States House of Representatives. And let's all push for her to get seated because the Congress will be a better place when Kim Teehee is seated. She leads our government relations team. She is so important to this effort to make sure Indian country and Cherokee Nation gets its share of these federal resources. Without further ado, and I know I've ate up a lot of time here, let's hear from Kim Teehee. What up?
All right. Thank you so much, Chief Hoskin. I appreciate that. Wow, right? We've got a lot of stuff going on, and you really just scratched the surface of what Chief Hoskin works on day to day and what we all work on day to day and month to month and such. And so if you'll look in the chat, the Gadoogie portal is link is there. And so please take the time to add your information. Importantly, when you register in the Gadoogie portal, you are not registering for payment yet for the stipend. And so you're just registering on the Gadoogie portal. We hope to have the applications out by June 1. And so just check on June 1 sometime after that, but you'll have to fill out the application going through the portal. And I fall in the bucket of what Chief Hoskin referenced, which is my parents live in an area that has pretty good connectivity, but my parents are in their late 70s and we're struggling with email addresses because my mom has 4 different email addresses. She just keeps forgetting the passwords. And so I'm trying to find, I'm having to develop new accounts for them now where I have the passwords and they don't lose them. And so we're going through that now. As Chief mentioned, you have to be a Cherokee citizen. We hope that payments, if all goes well, will start going out in June. But you can apply through the end of this year, so December 31st. And there's no residency requirement. There's no age or income limitations put on you on that at all. And if there are any issues, I don't know if somebody who's operating the chat, if you have any questions or have any issues with the portal, we have a number you can call. It's 918-453-5001. And so that's what the portal is. And this portal is a long time coming because you can also update your addresses. I added my telephone number in yesterday because it didn't have my number in there. And so it will give you the opportunity to do that and such. And so I think that's a good thing. Chief also talked about the American Rescue Plan. That was a $1.9 trillion plan that Congress approved with a historic amount devoted expressly to Indian country to the tune of $31.2 billion. What that means for Indian country is $20 billion is being distributed by Treasury, and then 11.2 is being distributed through the different federal agencies in the form of grants, whether that's healthcare, housing, public safety, education, even 20 million for language preservation, which is a huge priority for Chief Hoskin and the Cherokee Nation and such. And so, and as Chief mentioned, how that funding was distributed is for the 20 billion set aside in direct funding to tribes is a 1 billion that was distributed to every tribe in the country. All 574 federally recognized tribes received a piece of the 1 billion equally. And then the 19 billion to be distributed based in part on population, on part on employee numbers and such. And so tribes across the country are receiving their amounts as well. And we're working with Treasury, and we worked with members of Congress on how Treasury would provide guidance on how we spend down those dollars. Importantly, during the CARES Act direct distribution to tribes, which was $8 billion, which is far less than the current package, but it had so many restrictions and really handicapped the tribes in how they spent down the money, and because of the restrictions. And so as a result, Indian country rallied and worked with members of Congress to create some more clarity in the law, including direct distribution of these funds to federally recognized tribes, because part of the CARES Act funding is still in litigation over the eligibility of Alaska Native corporations to participate in the CARES Act funding. So that's still in litigation. So there's, a funding set aside just in case the U.S. Supreme Court, which already heard the arguments, rules that they are eligible, or if they're not eligible, then that funding will be distributed to the Indian tribes. And so, there's a possibility that more funding could be coming as a result of the CARES Act. And so we also asked for more time to spend down the dollars, and we got that. The spend down date is end of the year in 2024. But for certain infrastructure projects and stuff, it's 2026. And so, there is a huge effort underway to not only ensure that we have the flexibility we need, but also Chief Hoskin has worked very hard on a plan incorporating the views of our, not only our elected officials, but also the citizens of what they say they need. But in addition to that, we continue to work with the other agencies. Broadband is a huge area, and water system infrastructures is a huge area for us, and getting the resources we need to address those areas is critical. Chief Hoskin was fortunate enough to be invited to participate in a briefing within the federal family. The White House asked him to join a few other tribal leaders to brief the federal government, the federal agencies who have a stake in learning these issues, developing policies around these issues, and as well as recommending funding for them. And so Chief Hoskin talked about this. Importantly, we all have heard of Wilma Mankiller. We celebrated the 40th anniversary of Wilma Mankiller and Charlie Soap's. They led the Bell Project in Adair County. You guys may have heard of this project because it allowed federal dollars to be used for supplies to develop water pipelines, and the community of Bell themselves provided sweat equity to put the pipeline in themselves. It was a sweat equity program, a self-help program that catapulted Chief Mankiller to sort of national recognition. And so, but those pipelines are 40 years old now, and we need critical resources in order to update that and develop infrastructure elsewhere. Another area of particular importance to us is broadband. We have discovered throughout the country, not just us, the big gaps that have that we've always known to be there, but COVID really highlighted the gaps, and that the gaps are connectivity in the rural communities in an era and in a time during pandemic when we need our students to be healthy and safe at home and able to learn at a distance, as well as our elders to be able to access medical care through telehealth. And so we have put resources into what I call Band-Aid fixes. We're doing the best we can, but knowing we have to address it, putting mobile Wi-Fi hotspots throughout Cherokee Nation and providing devices for people so that they have connectivity. And so, but we are committed to doing more. And so as a result of that, President Biden had introduced the American Jobs Plan. It's really an infrastructure package. It's a $2 trillion package. And so what we've been doing is working very closely, not only with the administration, but with our allies and our advocates. And I'll count Congresswoman Sharice Davids as one of our allies and advocates and champions for Indian country, because she has gone to bat for us every step of the way. And when it comes to Indian country issues, we live in a state where we have a delegation that unfortunately voted against CARES Act and ARPA funds. And I don't know what they're going to do on this infrastructure package, but we are making our priorities known, and we're working with our champions who we know are going to support these packages, and with the intertribal organizations like the National Congress of American Indians on developing prioritizations for this particular bill, because our priorities include broadband, water infrastructure, roads, and new partnering opportunity with regard to that. But so we're working closely on making sure tribes are expressly included. This is important to us, that we be expressly included. We were, in the CARES Act, we're expressly included in the direct funding that was put aside for Indian tribes, the $8 billion. What the problem was is when CARES Act was finally passed as law and the agencies were figuring out how to deploy those resources out to the states and et cetera, because tribes were omitted from mention in much of the law, they didn't know whether or not the tribes were eligible to receive those funds directly. So with ARPA, we made sure we made it known that it's not just direct funds that tribes need, as the funds are being distributed in all these different categories from, education, public safety, housing, et cetera, that tribes are expressly included in those pockets so that we're not forgotten, and so that there is no ambiguity or confusion about whether or not funding should be directly deployed to us as government. It's only appropriate that we get direct streams of funding. So we continue to fight for that as well. And so those are just some of the areas that we continue to work on. The other thing coming up probably as early as next week is the president's budget request. Every year, there's a lot of things going around funding up. That's why I'm focusing on this right now. Every year, the president historically submits his budget proposal to Congress in February. But because we had an election year, that's been delayed. So the president submitted a skinny budget to the Congress, knowing that he still has to work on more comprehensively. What this is, and it's especially important when the person in the White House is of the party that's the majority in the House and the Senate, which is the case. So there's a lot of collaboration and coordination going on. And so even in the skinny budget, we saw increases in Indian Health Service. One of the things that Chief Hoskin has asked us to do is to look at ways to make sure that we have guaranteed funding. This is important because as we saw during the pandemic, Congress was not passing budgets in a timely way. And you kept hearing on the news about the potential for government shutdowns, right? When government shutdowns occur, there is a great disruption that occurs in Indian country because probably 90% of the funding that we received are considered discretionary dollars. And so when government shuts down, the funding ceases. And that's critical to and absolutely disruptive of our communities whenever that impacts our healthcare services, our public safety services, the programs that benefit the neediest of the needy, like the food distribution program, the commodities program on Indian reservations that USDA operates. So one of the things that we've been advocating for is for either mandatory funding, which is in the time of the budget disruption, that this funding it doesn't stop. It comes directly to the tribes automatically, like Social Security. The SNAP program, that's the food stamps program for the country, right? Which Indians qualify for too, but you can't double dip. But that is a mandatorily funded program. So there is no reason why we can't have at a minimum, the things that benefit our citizens the most, that they have a secure path to continuing to have those services and programs and resources provided to them during times of shutdown. So what I'm very pleased about, that's my long way of saying, the president's skinny budget supports forward funding for Indian Health Service. So that means that if Congress approves that, that means that we get not only that year's fiscal year's funding, but the next year's fiscal year of funding. And then the hope is that Congress will take up their appropriations bills, not have us operating off of continuing resolution after continuing resolution, because what happens is that, and I feel so sorry for our treasurer. We were facing last December a potential government shutdown because we thought the government was going to shut down. We were facing a CARES Act spend down distribution deadline by the end of the year. And she had to develop a contingency plan just in case we did shut down. Plus, she had to develop the onerous quarterly reporting, which is 300 some pages that she had to submit to the Department of Treasury all at one time. So that's too much. And so I do think these baby steps are a way to alleviate that and to provide certainty that funding streams will not be disrupted when it comes to Indian country. So those are some of the other things that we continue to work on. And President Biden's, if you guys are wanting to know what he stands for, during his campaign, he put out a tribal nations, a very comprehensive plan, probably the most comprehensive plan of any sitting president. Even Obama, as good as he was on Native issues, his policy papers were not lengthy. President Biden's multi-page tribal nations plan. I have a lot of former colleagues and friends in this administration, and I've encouraged them to read that because if they want to know where the president stands on Indian country issues, they can look at that document. It's a roadmap. And so now is the time during ARPA and during the budget process and during the infrastructure package is the time for us to ride those coattails and make sure that our priorities are reflected in each of those priorities and make sure that the members of Congress are also expressly including us in those packages. And so I think we're having good progress. Just yesterday, Chief Hoskin met with the HUD Secretary, Secretary Fudge, on our housing priorities. And then tomorrow, he is testifying before the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs on the Durban Feeling Native Languages Act. And Durban Feeling, for those of you who don't know, has passed that he is a great linguist of Cherokee Nation. And we were able to get a bill introduced in Congress, named after him. And so that's the Durban Feeling Native American Languages Act. So that's tomorrow. If you guys want to tune in, it'll be webcast live and it'll be at 1:30 Central Time tomorrow. And but Chief Hoskin is going to testify on that bill tomorrow. But in addition to that, we're hosting this week the USDA in DC, the Office of Tribal Relations, who are interested in seeing some of the things that we were able to accomplish, such as the meat processing plant, et cetera, in our community too. So, we've had a lot of interest in how we responded in COVID. Chief Hoskin has been a leader in how our response is, from health to protecting our first language speakers. My parents are Cherokee first language speakers. My aunts and uncles are first language speakers. I'm blessed to still have them. And I'm just so grateful that they were prioritized, our fluent speakers, with the frontline healthcare workers. And every time we fight for Congress and fight for self-determination and fight for the right to make our own decisions because we know what's best in our community, always remember that during the time of COVID, CDC, Indian Health Service, they all let the tribes decide how they wanted to distribute the vaccinations when they got them. And Chief Hoskin, put forward his proposal, which was implemented, prioritizing Cherokee first language speakers with healthcare workers. And I will forever be grateful for that, because, we lost about 50 during COVID, but we are so working hard to keep them safe. They're so precious to us in our culture. But also he's incorporating them into our plans for the language. It's wonderful. I don't know if you guys have been to Tahlequah. The old Tahlequah Casino is being transformed into the new immersion center, the Durban Feeling Immersion Center, and across the way, next door to it, are tiny homes being built so that the students will be able to interact with our speakers, our elder speakers. And so I'm so looking forward to that. But other priorities, Chief also mentioned delegate to Congress. As we know, the pandemic kind of stymied our efforts in March of 2020. That was our last visit to DC, but we had great support. We didn't just rest on that, though. Even though we put our efforts toward COVID relief dollars and working with Congress, what we also did was went around the country working with the other tribal organizations across the nation in securing resolutions in support of delegate to Congress. And so we also have been working closely with Speaker Pelosi's office and the potential committees of jurisdiction on a path forward. And we've had good, strong, productive meetings. What we're looking at, though, is something that's precedent setting, something that's historic and never been done before. We don't have a member of Congress, delegate or an actual member of Congress, who has ever been seated as a result of a treaty right. Usually members that are seated are a result of some congressional enactment. But in this instance, we're looking at a treaty right that we're asking Congress to fulfill. And the floodgates are not opening. There are only 2 other treaties involving 3 other tribes. The Delaware tribe and then the Chickasaw and Choctaws have 1 treaty on their own, but our language is the most clear. And I think, that we have great momentum on this. I think that now that the ARPA, the CARES Act, the election, the transition, and the administration, now that that's kind of underway and set aside, I think that there is a great opportunity where we are right now to focus on delegate. And so our plan is to get us seated. Other areas that we're working on, and I'm going to raise this in particular for you guys, because this is a priority for Representative Davids, which is the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. That's something that's near and dear to our heart. It's a priority for Chief Hoskin. It's a platform for the First Lady, the protection and welfare of Cherokee families, women, and children. And so this is important to us. The VAWA 13 is a proposal that I led when I was in the White House in the Obama years, and then it got passed into law as part of VAWA 13 after I left. But it was historic because it gave tribes limited jurisdiction over non-Indians who commit domestic violence on tribal land. And what VAWA 21 does is expand that special authority to include other areas like sexual assault, trafficking, assault on a law enforcement officer, those kinds of things. And Cherokee Nation is one of 27 tribes that have accepted that special jurisdiction. And so we're looking for that opportunity. too. And we're continuing to look at other reauthorizations. By the way, VAWA has passed the House, and we're trying to shake it loose on the Senate side. But other things that we're working on are the Native American Housing Self-Determination Act, reauthorization of it. It's operating off of a 2013 authorization, and it needs refining. Luckily, Congress has continued to fund it, but it needs refining so that we can benefit even better from the federal housing programs. And so these are just some of the priorities that we're facing. Also, I can keep going on. Indian Child Welfare Act, that is something that is that we're working on now. We have a federal court ruling that ruled parts of the Indian Child Welfare Act were unconstitutional and parts of it are not. And so we're trying to figure out the best path forward in an appeal or in a congressional response. And so we look at litigation, because litigation that might impact us, like Affordable Care Act. Affordable Care Act we looked at very hard, because included in that law is the permanent authorization of the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act. That is the foundational law that authorizes tribal healthcare delivery systems. And if Affordable Care Act were ever declared unconstitutional by a court, then Indian Healthcare Improvement Act would go away. And so that's why we look at that litigation very closely. And luckily, in this administration, the Department of Justice, the new Department of Justice, entered a new modified position on Affordable Care Act and said that they believed it was constitutional. And so I don't think we're going to have to worry about that now. But I can tell you what, we were already prepared to quickly pivot to Congress if for some reason Affordable Care Act was ever declared unconstitutional, to make sure members of Congress quickly acted to authorize the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act again. And I know that's a whole lot. That's that we kind of live this every day. But we did want to be thorough with the information that we are providing you, because it's sort of up to date, in the moment kind of information that we are continuing to work on. I also want to mention that we have a microsite on the Cherokee website, Cherokee Nation website. Adam, I know Adam McCurry is my deputy, and he's on here. You might go ahead and send the chat and give the link, but you can find it on our website, and it's a little microsite, and he'll give the link, and that can be shared here. And on that link is a page devoted to civil engagement. We had our at-large community members in mind whenever we developed this page. And we developed some template letters that we are in the process of updating, of areas of priorities for us, where it would be helpful for your members of Congress, your delegations, to hear from you on your position when it comes to some of the issues, if you want to support us on those issues. And obviously you can customize the letters. We also have links on finding your members of Congress, addresses and names and such too. And we welcome copies of your letters if you are so inclined to participate in that. The other thing I've been asking people to do is give us recommendations. This is really the citizens page. If there are, it's not the sexiest looking page out there. It's just a bunch of links to template letters, and we're trying to keep it current. But we want some suggestions on what else can we provide on this letter. It's really your page. How can we improve it in order for you to feel like you're being supported and that you're supporting us in our priorities? And so I'm going to ask Adam to give you his email number. His email address, so that we can collect your ideas. I should probably challenge each of our at-large communities to give us some ideas, and then we pull some top ideas, and then we might do that. I may try to develop a contest of some sort to see how we can incorporate some of the views to improve your page. And finally, I'm just going to say one more thing, because I know that you're waiting to hear from him. David Hampton is a jewel. He's just a treasure in my books. I come from, both my mother and father are full Cherokees. They're first language speakers, but we'd never had our genealogy done. And but I was always interested in it. My family, those who came on the removal trail on the Teehee side, settled in the Salem area of Stillwell, Oklahoma. And the church there is where my family, my grandma's dad, her grandparents went to church there, both my grandma and grandpa, Teehees. And, that church was founded in 1839, right after removal. And so that is just, it's just precious to me. So I can ramble all day long, but I think of the history that we have here and what it is that we're protecting. And I want you all to feel like you're absolutely a part of everything that we're doing, and that includes this kind of engagement as well. But David was able to help me identify my genealogy on the Teehee and Springwater side. That's my mother's maiden name. And it turns out I didn't realize, it'd never been in my family before that, I'm related to Nancy Ward, too, I think 7th granddaughter, and then was distantly related to Chief Baker through the Nancy Ward connection. And then just these connections, 7th degree cousins, it was just fascinating, the history that's there. But David did that so thoroughly, and I was able to accompany the Remember the Removal bike riders, who we have a send-off ceremony tomorrow for. And David did the genealogy for all the riders one year, and I accompanied 1 week's leg of that trip, not on a bike. I was in an air-conditioned car following the bike riders. And David was kind enough to tell me I think I was related to about 7 of the bike riders, and he told me in what degree I was related to them and how we were related and such. And so it's such an impressive thing. I know not everybody is into that. I love it. I love that history. I love knowing where I come from and such. And so I think the world of David. With that, I will just turn it back over to the organization. Mado.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Teehee and Chief Hoskin. Does anybody have, I know there's one question in the chat from Melissa. Are any of these funds set aside for at-large community grants?
Well, we had a good experience with that last year, and we're developing plans to do it again. So if you look at the plan, which is available if you go to the website, anadisco.com, that's our press website, but you can look at our press releases there. You can see some percentages. I can't remember the exact percentage or dollar amount, but there's a significant amount of money, tens of millions of dollars, to a line item that says CCO and community partners. It's within that category that we can support our community organizations. Now, the caveat is we have to stay within the parameters set forth in ARPA. Those are fairly broad, so we're going to have to put some thought into how at-large communities could use these funds within the meaning of ARPA. But it is on our to-do list. Okay.
Right. Thank you for that answer, Chief Hoskin. Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Okay. Well, with that being said, my name's Annalise. I'm the treasurer for the Kansas City Cherokee community. It's my pleasure to introduce David Hampton. He's been doing genealogy since 1961, and he spends most of his time doing Cherokee genealogy now. He has been the president of the Association of the Descendants of Nancy Ward since 1994. And is currently vice president of the Going Snake District Heritage Association and treasurer of the Oklahoma chapter of the Trail of Tears Association. Since 2009, he's been doing genealogies for the Cherokee Remember the Removal bike riders. With that being said, I'll let you go ahead and take over.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I need to share my screen here. Can you see it now?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to talk today about the beginning fundamentals of genealogy research, and then concentrate briefly on beginning Cherokee genealogy for those with a Dawes ancestry. The definition of genealogy is the study of ancestry and family history and the records created from such a study. And I would add to that definition that it must be studied in conjunction with the history during the time person of the periods of the persons being researched. Over 100 years ago, Genealogy was thought by most people as a snobbish hobby, mainly for the interest of those wishing to show relationships to famous people or to join prestigious societies like the Daughters of the American Revolution. Like most disciplines, genealogy has changed a lot over the last 100 years. In 1977, the book Roots by Alex Haley and its accompanying widely watched TV movie created a great interest in genealogy. And I want to begin here by reviewing some important genealogical and historical organizations and societies, and I'll briefly mention just 6, although there are literally hundreds. The National Genealogical Society, headquartered in Falls Church, Virginia, was founded in 1903. It has widely attended annual conferences and emphasizes documentation of findings. There are currently approximately 10,000 members of the National Genealogical Society. The Genealogical Society of Utah was established in 1894 as an arm of the LDS or Mormon Church. It began microfilming records in the U.S. county courthouses in 1938 and in international repositories in 1946. For over 50 years, it has generally not been necessary to travel to various courthouses to look at records, but rather to visit the Family History Library in Salt Lake, where copies of those records are easily accessible to all on microfilm and in digital form. I have been over 20 times to the research their holdings. The first time was in 1982, and the last time was in 2005. Now, Family Search has replaced Genealogical Society, and in 1998, it started digitizing its microfilm records and making them available online at no charge, as many as they can, in accordance with agreements made by the providing entities. They also have a group of thousands of volunteers who index these records, making searching much easier for the researcher. Here's an example of a marriage license for my great-great-grandparents in Union County, Georgia in 1848, which can be viewed at familysearch.org. The records that I'm going to show in the presentation today will be related to this couple. In Oklahoma, genealogy research has been concentrated on the resources of the Oklahoma Historical Society, founded in 1893, which has an extensive collection of Oklahoma records. And of course, every state has a historical society. The Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis was founded in 1866, and the State Historical Society of Missouri was founded in 1898 in Columbia. The Kansas State Historical Society, housed in Topeka, was founded in 1875. Now, Oklahoma Historical Society was the first place that I ever went to do serious research in 1967. At that time, it was the only place in Oklahoma that had microfilm of all of the U.S. Census records. OHS also has been instrumental in developing an important repository of Oklahoma newspapers. Approximately 95% of all newspapers ever published in Oklahoma are available today in digital media at the Oklahoma Historical Society. Research into newspaper holdings has started to be an important source of research in the last 10 years with the onset of digitization and the optical character recognition that continues to improve. Nearly all of the Oklahoma newspapers prior to 1923 have been digitized and are available online for research at newspapers.com, genealogybank.com, and other sites. These are generally fee-based websites. Now, to begin research into one's ancestors, it's important to start with what you know and what your close family knows. This is somewhat less important than years ago because of the records being kept now, though some of those less than 100 years old may be restricted. In 1920, few people had birth certificates, and most deaths were not recorded. So now it is likely to locate birth and death records kept by the various states during the past century. When I began recording, I had 4 grandparents, 2 great-grandparents, brothers of 2 other great-grandparents, and a sister of a great-great-grandparent living. So this was a huge beginning toward filling out a pedigree chart. Now, when you begin to look at records, American research usually starts with the U.S. Census from 1790 to the current. Censuses from 1790 to 1840 only list the name of the head of the household and grouped the other members into gender and age categories. Starting with the 1850 census, the name of every person, their age and birthplace has been listed. Census records have been available on microfilm for many years, but you would have to travel to a repository that had the film, like the Oklahoma Historical Society. You had to know in what county your ancestor lived, and then look page by page on the microfilm reader. And it was very time consuming. However, for over 10 years, digitized copies of the censuses have been available online in many places and have generally been well indexed by Family Search or Ancestry.com and other websites, making it possible to find someone in just a few minutes. Now, census records are not public until 72 years have passed. So the 1940 census is the last one currently available for public research. The 1950 census will become public in April of 2022. Ancestry.com and FamilySearch.org will likely have indices available within a very few weeks of its release. Now, when I started to do research of my ancestors in 1961, one of the first things I discovered was my descent from Nancy Ward, a prominent Cherokee woman who died about 1820. This was because of an article written about my great-great-grandfather and his ancestors by Dr. Emmett Starr, published in a Tahlequah newspaper in 1916 that had been handed down in my family. Nancy Ward was practically unknown then, but has gotten a lot more publicity over the subsequent 60 years. In 1994, we formed an organization of her descendants, of which there are tens of thousands living today. And Becky Hobbs and Nick Sweet have written a musical about her life called Nanyehi, The Story of Nancy Ward, which has been performed many times over the past 10 years to good reviews and with the assistance of the Cherokee Nation. Now, my Cherokee descent has channeled me into specializing for the past 20 years in Cherokee genealogies. For over 10 years, I have done genealogy reports for the Cherokee Nation Remember the Removal Bike Riders. Here's an example of a chart of Cherokee ancestors I created for that purpose. This individual has the largest number of traceable Cherokee ancestors that I have ever encountered, 321. I also work writing biographies and genealogies for the Oklahoma chapter of the Trail of Tears Association when it honors those who came on the trail with a ceremony marking their graves. To date, the Oklahoma chapter has marked the graves of 157 persons who came on the forced removal. The last was Rebecca Ketcher Nugent in June of 2019, where we had nearly 200 attendees. She was the last surviving Cherokee Trail of Tears participant. Now, no one can honestly say that he or she specializes in Native American genealogy because every one of the 574 federally recognized tribes has a different set of records to review for genealogy purposes. For the majority of natives in Oklahoma who descend from citizens of one of the 5 tribes, the most important are the Dawes records. The Dawes Commission did its work from 1893 until 1914, We could spend hours discussing the work of the Dawes Commission, both for its historic as well as its genealogical value. The commission had two assignments. One was to determine who were the citizens of the tribes, and two, to allot tribal lands to those citizens, making sure that specifically the land around their homesteads were allotted to them. It was a monumental task. The native tribes owned their land in common. Improvements such as houses, barns, fences were privately owned and could be sold, but the land itself belonged to the tribe, and if unused or abandoned, was available to any tribal citizen for improvement. We often hear stories today from many persons who claim that their ancestors were eligible for enrollment but did not enroll for various reasons. This is not true. The commission made a strenuous attempt to determine who were the citizens of the tribes and to forcibly enroll them and allot land to them by getting information from relatives and neighbors if necessary. I have looked at literally thousands of Cherokee enrollments. I'm only aware of 2 adult citizens who should have been enrolled but were not. There are many dozens of Cherokee children who fell through the cracks, but all of them have an enrolled parent. And typewritten, the application consists of 2 parts, a summary we usually call a census card as shown here, and a typewritten transcribed testimony given to the Dawes Commission. Ideally, this was given by the head of the family, but a large number of traditional Cherokee refused to enroll themselves, and their testimony was provided by relatives and acquaintances. Reviewing these records are the first place to start genealogy research for Cherokee citizens. Here is a recap of the number of applications taken by the Dawes Commission relating to the Cherokee Nation. 60 years ago, there were approximately 14,000 Cherokee and Freedmen original enrollees still living. The last one died in April of 2012. And I want to talk about 2 other very important sources for beginning research into Cherokee ancestors. First is the Eastern Cherokee, sometimes called Gian Miller applications. In 1906, the immigrant or non-Old Settler Cherokees won a court case against the U.S., which resulted in an eventual payment to each of them or their descendants in 1910. Over 40,000 applications were taken, which give a trove of genealogical information about every family. Here are 2 pages from the application of Coos Thompson. Notice this gives not only his parents, but his grandparents and his siblings. And in 1892, a Cherokee physician named Dr. Emmett Starr from Claremore began compiling genealogy records on mixed blood Cherokee families, eventually resulting in thousands of pages of records now housed at the Oklahoma Historical Society. All of you who are Cherokee citizens likely have ancestors who are included in these records. And here is one page that shows Caleb Starr or Coos Thompson in Dr. Starr's records. Now, one more thing that is changing genealogy is DNA. Even over the past few years, DNA research has changed and is quickly becoming a way to verify paper trail research for the past couple of 100 years. Its importance will continue to grow as more and more people get themselves DNA tested. Okay, that's the end of my talk. I can take any questions if anybody has any.
For the questions, just feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat and I can read it for you. Thank you for that great presentation, David, by the way.
Thank you.
Cherokee Ward Society still active? And if so, how would, if we have information on that ancestry, how would we go about sending that in?
Now, what I didn't hear the whole question there.
Is the Descendants of Nancy Ward Society still active? And if so, how would folks send in that information?
Yes, we have a website, nancyward.org. You can get the address to a copy of an application that you can fill out and send it in. We didn't meet last year because mainly because of COVID. I'm not sure we're going to be able to meet this year either, but we may try to work out some kind of a Zoom meeting.
David, this is Kim. Are you accepting new projects from people wanting their genealogy?
I do. Right now, I'm working on a book about Nancy Ward descendants that I'm going to hopefully finish in the next month. So I have a big project going here. I'm really working on trying to get the complete list of her descendants through her great, that's 4 greats, grandchildren. And I think I've succeeded. And I want to be able to publish that as one of my last books. It's going to be about 1,600 pages. So I'm trying to get myself acclimated to getting quotes, to having this printed and find out what it's going to cost. So, but I still have worked in some projects over the last month or so, and I can probably do so. You saw my email address, CherokeeResearch@gmail.com. You can send. I usually only work on those who have a Dawes enrolled ancestor.
David, there's some questions in the chat. The first one is from Eloise. She asks, why doesn't Indian linkage show on DNA analysis?
I'm not sure. You mean the tribe or the fact that people have Native American ancestors? Generally, I've noticed from DNA that a lot of people show some DNA that's Native American. By the time you get to a very small degree of blood, that may not show any longer. So it probably depends on how much blood quantum you have before you will see a DNA match. I would say if you have less than 1%, you probably won't see that. So you're going to need to be at least 1/64th before you'll see a DNA match that shows a Native American.
David, there's another question in the chat from Melissa. She says, is there a blood connection between the Cherokee Paris family and the Bushyhead family?
Right off the top of my head, I don't know. If you'll send me an email, I'll check it out for you and see. I have a very extensive database. It now has over 130,000 names in it, so I can pretty quickly check. I have a very large percentage of the Dawes ancestors in my database, so I can usually figure out if they're Dawes enrolled or further back.
If anybody has a question that they want to ask out loud, go ahead, or I can keep reading from the chat. Linda, I saw you unmute yourself. Do you have a question?
Yes, please. What is that email or his email address again?
CherokeeResearch@gmail.com.
And I'll put it in the chat too.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good. Very good presentation.
There's another question from Kevin, and he asks, as a non-Cherokee, why is it important to you to research Cherokees?
As a non-Cherokee,
This is from Kevin Stretch.
Kevin's a Cherokee. I've done genealogy.
Yep, he has done my geology, and I appreciate that. So, why is it important for you to research Cherokee bloodlines?
It's where I developed my interest. I'm Cherokee.
Oh,
I'm not a lot Cherokee, but I'm some Cherokee. I descend from Nancy Ward.
great. I know that during our bike ride, that you identified one of the riders as being a Sequoia descendant, and so he was thrilled to find that out.
Yeah, generally every year that I do bike ride, there's almost always one who is a Sequoia descendant.
David, I have a question for you. So you were talking about like in your database about you look through your own database. I guess I'm wondering like how do you store your information, or like how are you finding these like linkages? I saw you kind of had like similar to like a phenology chart. Is that how you do it? And then you find like, do you make visual comparisons, or I guess do you do it through like some sort of like coding software or something?
I have a program that I'm using. It's called the Master Genealogist. It allows for you to enter information about people and also to show the sources that will create bibliographies and footnotes. And it also, what other thing I really like about it is that it has what's called user-defined tags. So I can set up a tag on a person to put in their Dodge roll number if I want to, and print out on reports. Now, unfortunately, that program, the people who produced that program quit supporting it in 2014, but it continues to work. And I was scared when I had to update to Windows 10 whether it would still work on that, but it does, and it works fine. So as long as it's still working, I'm going to keep using it. I don't know whatever the next Windows that they'll force us to update to, whether it's going to work on that or not, so it's kind of scary.
You might just have to get a new computer and not update. Just keep it. There's a question from David Crawford, and he says, David and Jack Baker published a book a number of years ago titled Old Cherokee Families, Notes of Dr. Emmett Starr. Is it still available? I don't know if you...
Not available. It's not available for sale. We only did 3 volumes. We have had for a long, long time a 4th volume ready to go, but it's not been published. So I would suggest you contact Jack Baker and light a fire under him and see if you can get him to help get this ready to publish. That's my suggestion here.
There's another question from Kevin Stretch, and he says, are you working with Google to identify Cherokees and or Cherokee burial sites for those who died during removal?
You mean along the trail or in Oklahoma?
Along the trail.
I'm not currently doing that. There are very, very few sites that we know where people are buried. There's a Trail of Tears Park in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, where 2 Cherokees died during the trail, whose graves were marked. Fly Smith and what's the other guy's name? I forgot right now. Anyway, I don't know. There's also the biography that I presented for Nancy Bushy Head Hildebrand. She died at Cape Girardeau, and her grave was marked, was kept by the local people for years and years, and is now marked there in the park. And I'm not aware of any others or who they might be. There may be some people who believe that Trail of Tears, people who died on the trail are buried in a particular cemetery, but as far as names or anything, I don't think we're ever going to find out.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any more questions for David?
I have a question that's selfish. David, I just emailed you. You mentioned you did somebody's a genealogy and found that they had 321 ancestors and
Cherokee ancestors.
Cherokee ancestors. I'd like for you to tell me what my number is. I emailed you. Maybe you can find that out.
Hey, I'll redo your chart. I gave you a chart when I did your genealogy before.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
redo your chart. There could have been additional ones discovered since I did yours. It's been quite a few years ago that I did your chart.
That's true, everyone. That's the other thing is David was always quick to point out that as technology improves and more things become digitized, the easier access he has, and he's always updating. So I haven't updated mine yet, but I will absolutely pay for you to update mine because I want to stay informed with the latest information.
Okay.
So,
This is Eloise. I have a question. Is there a linkage between Hildebrand and Hilderbrand, or is it just a misspelling between the two?
You mean with the E or the ER?
Yes.
They're the same people.
They're what?
Yep. It's just a different way to spell it.
So we may be related then, even though our names are spelled differently?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Bill, I saw you unmute yourself. Do you have a question? Oh, hold on. You got to unmute yourself, Bill. Hold on.
There we go. I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank David for his time tonight, and it was a very interesting presentation. And I wish we all had more time because I could listen to some more. Thank you.
Are there any more questions for David? We still have a couple more minutes. Feel free to speak up if you do have a question. All right. Melissa, what's next on the agenda?
Door prizes, and we're going to skip the trivia unless people want to guess their tribal counselor, because that's kind of needed.
And I did, yeah, and I did actually, I did actually draw the names already. It was fair, don't worry, I didn't pick myself. I have 4 winners, and they are Donna, Patty, Eloise, and Russ. If you want to send me your address, and I'm not sure if I have everybody's t-shirt size, but it's more than just a t-shirt, but send me your t-shirt size and your address to our email, or you can just direct message on Facebook. I'm putting the email in the chat, making sure it's spelled right. So yeah, just email me your address and your shirt size, and I will send you some awesome stuff. So that's it from me. Melissa, do you want to close out? And thank you so much again, David. That was really informative. I'm pretty ignorant to the whole thing, so that was really enlightening for me. I really appreciate it.
Much appreciated, David, and everyone for attending. Kimberly Teehee, we really appreciate you and joining us and giving us some of the information. I think Chief Hoskin left probably for a different engagement, but we're truly honored to have you all here tonight, and we appreciate your time. That's it for me, unless anyone has any other questions. Please mark your calendars for what day is it, Anna?
The June 12th?
Thank you, Jenny. June 12th, we're doing live traditional cooking with Cherokee National Treasurer Richard Fields and his beautiful wife, Sheila Fields. So I think we have it scheduled for 1 o'clock, Jenny. Is that correct?
I think so.
All right. So we'll see you all in June. Thank you very much and have a great night. Bye.
No, no.